Amazing performance by PSG. You have to give credit where credit is due. The first leg, they played better. Liverpool were able to bob and weave their way through, and then Curtis Jones scores the only goal in that matchup. But, and I have to repeat this because it was something that I mentioned on Sportsmax, PSG had never lost a match this season when scoring the first goal, when making it 1-0. After that, they never lost. And they still haven't, because they were able to win, and win convincingly. We'll get to the penalties in a little bit. Win convincingly against Liverpool at Anfield. For some, it's a great collective effort, because it was. It's the vindication of a collective work that Luis Enrique has been doing over, the past few months since the departure of Kylian Mbappe, and of course the season before that, Messi and Neymar also bidding adieu to Paris. But what ends up being important is maybe these players are going to be stars in the future, and many of them will be. Some may be a star in their own right, some a star in the making, but some will be good players to very good players that fit into a system that has been very beneficial to them. And Luis Enrique is able to put all these, he's been able to make an amalgamation of players and make a style that is very difficult to break down, number one, which is vital in Champions League. It's ironic because I'm talking about the defensive end first of PSG in Champions League, which is something we rarely ever talk about, or anyone would talk about. How the defensive structure of PSG makes them such a tough and difficult team to overcome. And it's going to make them even more difficult as they go through. Am I saying they're going to win? No, I'm not. But they have a good shot now. They eliminated one of the, I don't know if prohibited favorites, but surely one of the top two favorites they knocked out. So what better argument than that, correct? Yeah. So after all is said and done, Luis Enrique has been able to invert everything that PSG stood for prior to his arrival. Well, he's been able to do that. He's been able to say, okay, we're gonna build our team from the back to the front. And really, I don't have to worry that much about the front because you have some very good pieces up front. Just the whole structure of it. Guys, everyone defends, everyone attacks, everyone defends, but defending in certain ways that ends up being beneficial. It's not just, let's just drop back. Everybody's got to come back and defend for their life, which is at times what they did have to do. But defending in certain sectors, pressuring Liverpool at times, pressuring and forcing Liverpool to make mistakes. So from that perspective, yeah, they defend much better. And they're not leaving certain players out pretty much in the open and leave them exposed, leave them high and dry in terms of their defensive positioning. You have defenders that are much more solid. Look, to me, one of the men of the match today was William Pacho. Yes, William Pacho. The Ecuadorian youngster was tremendous as a central defender. He helped in so many ways. He blocked so many shots. He limited what Diogo Jota was capable of doing, which wasn't very difficult to do today. But also, every time that Mo Salah came in, he was able to either cut him off, block his shot, and not prevent him from penetrating. Liverpool wasn't that sharp throughout the whole tournament. Or not tournament, but throughout the whole series. They weren't the sharpest of teams. So he had a lot to do with that. Marquinhos by his side ends up being a pretty impressive tandem. And when you start to see what they've been able to do, well, we'll have to wait and see what ends up happening with Marquinhos and his injury, because Beraldo then comes in and plays a relatively solid game as well. In the midfield, pretty much impeccable. Vitinha, to me, was one of the biggest performers in the midfield for PSG. So you have to look at it from that perspective. Dembele, what can I not say about him? And for him, it's a bit poetic because he was the player that ends up being scapegoated 6 years ago when Barcelona had a 3-0 lead coming into Anfield. He missed a chance to make it 4-0. And then, of course, Liverpool end up coming back and winning not only that tie and They end up reaching the final. They end up winning the Champions League that year. So Dembele comes in, has a very good match. And for the most part, you saw him. You saw Hakimi. You saw over on the left, Nuno Mendes have a very good match as well. So overall, you did have a very good performance from PSG. And that's where you have to start focusing first. Because everyone in England and everyone in Spain is going to be looking. It's not that that PSG won. It's that Liverpool lost. And that's how it's going to be spun both in England as well in Spain. They're not going to be saying, hey, Luis Enrique's team won. No, it's Arne Slot's team lost. Because there is that media slant against Luis Enrique. As controversial as a coach as he may be, there's certain things that he's done that have made him look good. Not just in this match, but if you go to the Barcelona match and you see how Alejandro Balde was able to play, well, he's the one that brought in Balde to the 2022 World Cup team for Spain, and many criticized him for it. Well, long term, he got himself some bit of indication on that as well. Liverpool just didn't show up. Or not didn't show up. They didn't show up the way people thought they would. And that's the biggest problem with Liverpool in this Champions League tie. They saw a team, or they met a team that was able to neutralize them, that was able to limit them, that was basically having them depend on individuality. Said, you're going to beat us? Well, it's going to have to be Mo Salah. That's kind of daring to say. But if you understand where this is coming from, he didn't have a lot of connection with Trent Alexander-Arnold. He didn't have anybody to play with over on the right side. Diogo Jota wasn't too sharp. Darwin Núñez wasn't sharp. And Darwin Núñez will end up being the scapegoat on this one probably. Fairly, unfairly, well, I'll leave that up to you. Luis Diaz wasn't making the best decisions with the ball. Maybe 2-3 too many touches. Maybe needed to let the ball go a little quicker. And maybe needed to even shoot on some occasions and didn't. So that's on him as well. Dominik Szoboszlai, probably the best player. It wasn't Szoboszlai, but Szoboszlai had his ups and downs, had his moments, looked erratic, was trying to find ways to go forward, but just wasn't all there. But then again, neither was anyone around him. The best player might have been, and I'm stretching here, Alexis McAllister, because he just seemed to be at the right place at the right time every single time. The substitution that was done by Arne Slot for McAllister, well, it kind of takes away a lot of presence in the middle, and that's why you start to see a lot of back and forth in terms of PSG being able to transition better. Maybe they didn't finish, but you didn't have that presence in the middle that ends up allowing Liverpool to be able to transport the ball as effectively, or an outside threat, or anything along those lines in terms of what they were capable of doing. So when you look at it from that perspective, and maybe it also had to do a lot with the yellow card, although at that point, keep him on. If he's healthy, keep him on. He was already going to miss the next match after the yellow card. So just keep him there. If he gets sent off, well, that's a risk you do run, which I completely understand at that point. I don't know what else to say about Liverpool. It's a disappointing end, and maybe a little bit more of a disappointing season, because many were talking just 24 hours ago, talking about a potential treble. Although I don't know if the Carabao Cup would be considered a treble, but it would still be 3 trophies if they're able to win the Champions League, if they were able to win the Champions League. Well, now they'd have to wait maybe until the earliest, April 27th, to celebrate the league title. They will have a moment to kind of take revenge on Newcastle this weekend when they face them in the final of the Carabao Cup. But is it truly the season that they were looking for? Because a lot of their guns are placed on being in Munich. Well, I don't know. Maybe Liverpool do have some things that they have to look at when they face teams outside the Premier League, because that's been a problem for them. Maybe not so much in terms of how they did in the group stage, but when it gets to this stage, that's where they have to start looking, because PSG, often has been looked at as a laughing stock, often has been looked at as petro euros or petrodollars, but all of a sudden when they've said, you know what, let's try and be a little bit more normal of a club, well, all of a sudden that normalcy ends up making them a lot more effective and a lot more clearer in terms of what they want to do and who they want to be, which is actually the football club. Previous seasons, you saw them becoming maybe a lifestyle image or a lifestyle brand more than a football club. And that's when those two things colliding, well, they don't end up giving you one or the other. Although in their case, they did have that lifestyle brand look, but the football results kind of strayed. Or the ones that they wanted were straying because they've been able to win consistently in Ligue 1. But Ligue 1 is a different story. Ligue 1 is not their measure, is not their standard bearer. It's not the bar that they have to achieve or surpass. It's Champions League. And now they're in a position where they just could do that. We'll see. Right now, they find themselves on a path where they could get to semis. Although it still is a bit distant in that path. It could be interesting to see how far they do get, playing the way they are, and knowing what they want to do, and knowing how they can handcuff the other. Something that they have never, ever been able to do in the past. Before, it was, well, if they score 4, we can score 5. Now, if we score 4, they might not score 1. That's the big difference with PSG now.